Shalom and welcome to another episode of Faith Journeys with God in the Land. Today we have a great view from the Precipice of Nazareth as we talk about the life and ministry of Jesus. Shalom from the very windy Precipice of Nazareth. I'm going to duck down below on a trail in just a moment, but before I do that, I want you to get a perspective of the city of Nazareth that's right behind me. Nazareth is a large Arab-Israeli city today, but in the days of Jesus, it was no doubt a small city. My guess is 100 or 200 people. It was large enough to have a synagogue, as we'll talk about Luke 4 in a moment. So that means it had to have at least 10 men. But Nazareth was so small that, if you remember from John 1, Nathaniel asked what good can come out of Nazareth. And even though Nazareth is not even mentioned in Jewish sources, it's good old Philip who says simply 3 words, "Come and see." Great words as he began to realize who Jesus was as the spiritually oriented Messiah. So right behind me is the city of Nazareth. But what's in front of me, I want to give you a view of this because I like to refer to what we're looking at now as the backyard of Jesus. This is the Jezreel Valley. There's the hill of Moreh. Lots of things happened there. The story of Gideon, for instance, Judges chapter 6 and 7. There's Mount Tabor, the dome-shaped mountain. And what happened there? Judges chapter 4 and 5, when Deborah and Barak defeat Sisera, the Canaanite from Hatzor. But below us is really the width of the valley. Let me just turn around one more time before I go walking on this trail and maybe talk about Luke 4. But it's a fantastic time to be here on the precipice. The sun is a bit high. Usually we're here for sunsets, but what a great view of the Jezreel Valley. Well below us is the city of Afula, maybe where Gideon was from himself. And looking towards the west, there's the city in the area of Megiddo, and eventually the Carmel range to the west where the sun is setting. But this trail that I'm taking now will lead us down along the top of this precipice. But right there, as you saw initially, the city of Nazareth, this was a small town, and Jesus was raised there. In fact, like I said, this was what we're looking at, the backyard of Jesus. Can you imagine looking at this and recalling all the stories from the Hebrew Scriptures? And a beautiful place to come. But Jesus, in this occasion, was teaching in the synagogue. Now, at this point, the synagogue was not a worship center, if you will. There's an inscription that was found in Jerusalem that gives us the indication that the synagogue in the first century, prior to the destruction of the temple, was used for gathering and for reading the scriptures. Now, typically the Torah and probably the Ketuvim or the writings were read, but the itinerant rabbi, and in this case this was Jesus, he had the prerogative to read whatever he wanted from the Nevi'im or the prophets. So as the scroll of Isaiah is handed him, he turns to what we know as chapter 61, verses 1 and part of 2, and he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." And he basically unfolds his redemptive purpose. It must have been an amazing experience for those in the synagogue. In fact, the text tells us that at first they were amazed at his words, but then Jesus did something. It's not what he said, but it's what he left out in the passage that he read from in Isaiah chapter 61. He left out the phrase, "the vengeance of our God." The vengeance of our God. So we have to understand, why did he leave it out? He left it out because he knew that his redemptive purpose was to offer himself for both Jews and Gentiles. You see, everyone else and their brother in that day were expecting a politically oriented Messiah to come and deal with this Roman oppression, because they were, again, oppressed by the regulations, the rules, the laws, and the Jews, of course, would eventually revolt against Romans in 66 AD. In fact, there was a revolt that happened when Jesus was 10 years old in a place nearby here on the other side of the ridge at Sapori in about when Jesus is 10. It happened in about 6 AD. But Jesus did not come to deal with the Roman oppression. He came to offer a spiritual solution to the sin of the world and to usher in the kingdom of God. So isn't that incredible what Jesus left out? And because of that, all the people in the synagogue were really ticked off at him. They took him to the brow, or the cliff upon which the city was built, and they wanted to throw him off, but he then walked right through their midst. Jesus was all about fulfilling his Father's will. So Nazareth, ancient Nazareth, had this same view that we're enjoying today. But when we view the life and ministry of Jesus, we ask the question, maybe the same question that Nathaniel asked, what good can come out of this small town of Nazareth? It's not even on the radar screen. It's not even on the map. Can a Messiah-like figure really come from Nazareth? Well, let's return to those 3 words that Philip said in John 1. I love them, and I hope you do too. Come and see. That's all he said, because I think Philip realized that Jesus came to be a spiritual Messiah, to offer forgiveness of sins, to open the eyes of the spiritually blind, and to usher in this kingdom of God. And eventually, all the disciples would see Jesus in action. He would teach with authority, with smekah. He would heal. He would calm the waters of the Sea of Galilee. And this, one of the first encounters that in his ministry was to return to Nazareth, to teach in his hometown synagogue and proclaim his redemptive purpose. So may you be encouraged with these 3 words that Philip said, come and see. Because when we open our eyes and read the text of the Gospels and understand that Jesus really came for a redemptive purpose, and we are the recipients of that, of course, as we receive him by faith, and we are converted or transformed from a life of sin and hopelessness to a life of redemption. Come and see is what we are now all about. As we come and see who Jesus is, working in our lives, offering us salvation, inviting us to live according to the kingdom principles. I hope that other people around us, will come and see Jesus living in us. I know in my life that doesn't happen all the time, but we're invited to allow God's grace and love to flow in through us and to be displayed in us, how we live our lives, how we live out our walk of faith with God. So come and see Jesus, and may people say that about us as they see Jesus living in and through our walk of faith. So here from the Precipice of Nazareth, be encouraged to live out your faith in full view of the world around you. Until next time, shalom.